All right. Welcome and thank you for joining us for this session. Thank you for joining us for the conference. My name is Chelsea Ross. I'm the Deputy Director for the Partnership for Strong Communities. And this year, PSC Partnership is hosting 3 days of sessions featuring local, state, and national experts leading conversations that explore challenges, share best practices, and coalesce us around the critical next steps to address key affordable housing issues in our state. You can join in on the conversation at hashtag CAHC 2021 on Twitter and follow us at PSC Housing if you aren't already. This session is titled Capacity Building as Recovery, Creating Innovative Staff Development Opportunities for the Sector. And before I turn it over to our presenters, we'd like to thank our leading sponsors, the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority and the Melville Charitable Trust. Their support has allowed the conference to happen again this year. Thank you also to our collaborating sponsors, the Connecticut Department of Housing, Webster Bank, and Rockport Mortgage. We also have a bunch of supporting sponsors that have helped make this conference happen, including Beacon Communities, Capital for Change, Corporation for Supportive Housing, Elm City Communities, Fairfield County's Community Foundation, Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston, JHM Group, LISC, who you'll hear from today, National Equity Fund, and Trinity Financial. And last but not least, a big thank you to the community builders who have sponsored this session today. A few quick housekeeping items. This session is being recorded. We'll make all recordings available to conference attendees as soon as possible. This session may also be broadcast on CTN. All participants have entered muted. Please remain on mute unless the speaker has asked you to unmute. If you have a technology issue, please select the chat icon in the Zoom control panel and send it in the chat to PSC Zoom meetings, Chelsea Ross, and I'll do my best to assist you. And your speakers today will let you know when they want to hear and answer and address your questions. With that, I will now turn it over to Kasey to get us started. Kasey? You're still on mute, Kasey.
Thank you, Chelsea. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for today's session, Capacity Building as Recovery, Creating Innovative Staff Development Opportunities for the community development sector. And today's presentation is going to introduce you to the new Housing and Community Development Leadership Institute funded by the Department of Housing and Connecticut Housing Finance Authority. We'll review the current challenges and opportunities facing the community development sector in recruitment and retention, as well as in creating diverse and representative staff, and how the HCDLI is looking to address this. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to leave them in the chat and we'll answer them as we move through the session today. I'm Kasey LaFlam, and I'm a program officer with LISC Connecticut. LISC is one of the nation's largest community development support organizations, and we have 37 offices across the country, including one here in Hartford. Unlike most other LISC local field offices, we have a statewide focus with programs looking in urban, suburban, and rural communities. We've been active here in Connecticut since 1984, and since then we've invested over $85 million here in the state and supported the construction of more than 4,500 units of affordable housing. The benefit of being a local program of a national organization is being able to tap into expertise available in a variety of initiatives such as creative placemaking, community safety and justice, family income and wealth building, and construction of recreation fields, among many others. All this work culminates towards LISC's boldest initiative yet, Project 10X. LISC is committed to investing $1 billion over the next 10 years to close racial health, wealth, and opportunity gaps. This initiative is driving force behind much of the work that LISC Connecticut has been focusing on recently. And I am joined today by a good friend of LISC Connecticut, Fran Martin.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really wonderful to be here and to be part of this conversation today. I describe myself now as a community development professional, but I have to say that my evolution in this work occurred through a fairly nonlinear journey into the sector. First, as a community-based behavioral health clinician, working to support people with serious mental illness to live lives of quality, but very quickly realizing that many of the struggles of the clients that I was working with related either directly or indirectly to challenges around housing. And I knew nearly not enough about housing to be an effective resource and support for them, which led to my subsequent career journey over the next 10 to 15 years, working in a variety of organizations in the housing field, everything from operating housing programs to working for a national nonprofit intermediary, Corporation for Supportive Housing, that brought me into the work in the worlds of housing development, housing finance, and housing policy. And then as part of that evolutionary journey and my seeking solutions through questions and exploration, which is really also another way of talking about the Institute, my decision to step away from working for one organization and to then move into consulting work, where I've had the opportunity to both work with and learn from clients across a range of organizations in the community development space. So now as we look ahead, again, having had the opportunity to be part of many conversations that have been raised over the years about how do we strengthen our field and looking ahead both currently and into the future, my deep interest in this Leadership Institute stems from a recognition that the work of community development is deeply impacted by the presence or absence of the very communities for which the work is undertaken. Communities of color, communities of immigrants, communities of people seeking greater opportunities for themselves and their families. And it is lessened, our work is lessened by their absence, and it's strengthened by their presence. So that for me is our invitation to you as we work together and have this conversation today, and hopefully continuing the conversations with at least some of you into the future as we build out this Leadership Institute opportunity.
So what is the Housing and Community Development Leadership Institute? It was really created by the urging of the Department of Housing Commissioner Salem Mascara-Bruno, who recognized that there was a gap in professional development opportunities here in Connecticut. So unlike other states and localities that may have a backbone support organization for community development corporations, that structure really doesn't exist here in Connecticut to support continued professional development opportunities and organizational networking and relationship building. So in January 2020, the Department of Housing and Connecticut Housing Finance Authority made an initial 3-year commitment to establish a learning program that would largely focus on recruiting new talent into the community development sector, with an emphasis on Black, Indigenous, and other persons of color, and especially women of color. Dale Krupp of the Hamden Economic Development Corporation led this work starting in January 2020. And originally it was imagined as a classroom-based learning program. But when COVID hit, like most of us, we needed to pivot in our work and revise the curriculum structure. And so despite these challenges of the last year and a half, hats off to Dale. He did an excellent job in recruiting. There were nearly 30 individuals that had signed up. He connected them with ongoing learning opportunities, ones that he instructed himself, as well as with other institutions such as NeighborWorks America. And today there are roughly 20 of those individuals who are still continuing on their learning pathways. LISC was approached earlier this year about assuming management of the HCDLI to move this work forward. And that was officially, we officially assumed that role as of September 1. So later in the presentation, we'll dive a little deeper into the goals of the HCDLI and some of the changes to the program structure since LISC has assumed management of this. So you might be thinking, why was LISC interested in taking on this work and this new initiative? Well, for us, a real focus is on capacity building with our partners. And capacity building really begins with staff on hand and seeing the challenges that many organizations faced in trying to grow or expand impact. So several months ago, NeighborWorks America actually released some initial findings of a survey that they conducted with community development professionals across the country, asking them about the challenges around recruitment and retention in the sector. And they had responses to those challenges, and very similar to what LISC offices across the country have heard from our local partners. So just to highlight some of those challenges, unclear pathways for growth for individuals who are early in their careers. So people starting in community development, not necessarily seeing what the steps were to move forward, and exiting into alternative career pathways. Capacity constraints that really limited organizations' ability to hire green or inexperienced candidates. And then lastly, organizational culture and hiring practices that continue to limit hiring from targeted communities, particularly of BIPOC residents. So Fran, do you want to share a little bit about how some of these challenges perpetuate a lot of the inequities within our work?
Yeah, and just to add on to what Kasey's been identifying, we continue to see the lack of these structured pathways into community development, the reliance on personal networks to learn of opportunities and to be supported in taking steps forward. Many of these networks still being characterized by race and ethnicity, gender, and socioeconomics, and the lack of financial investment within organizations in organizational and staff development for multiple reasons, have all contributed to a sector that does not include or does not represent those very communities that it is serving. And particularly we see that when we look at the leadership and decision makers in the organizations in the community development sector. And as Kasey mentioned, this is true not only in Connecticut, but also a concern across the country. In my organizational development work, for example, I'm seeing that tsunami of generational leadership change that's impacting so many community development organizations today, from housing-focused organizations to human service agencies, to organizations focused on issues of the environment, food security, and land use, but rarely have I seen efforts to planfully use that transition period as an opportunity to develop or recruit and develop diverse pools of talent within the organizations. And so what are the impacts of not changing these dynamics? For example, the inability to invest in staff, with possible exception of a small number of higher paid senior positions, that ultimately excludes candidates who may have the interest in the talent, but who may also be the primary income earners for their families or who have primary responsibilities of care and so are not able to enter into those opportunities within organizations. So I think what we're talking about is a complicated mix of factors and drivers, including how community-based and focused organizations define the very skill sets that they're seeking. For example, the value placed on academic credentials, while not necessarily identifying the value of other skills and capacities that a candidate may bring to that position, the norm that the best staff have the greatest technical knowledge. And again, that can act to exclude valuable and diverse talent pools into organizational opportunities that could lead to pathways of development for those very same organizations. So looking at opportunities for change, just to walk through a couple of different real opportunities here. And again, I think our shared interest in both supporting, sustaining, and developing the work of the Housing and Community Development Leadership Institute. Again, as we've been talking about, we're in a time of transition, transformation in our workplaces, in our educational institutions, our communities and neighborhoods. Some of it, most recently driven by the combined health and economic impacts of COVID. Some of it underway for longer, such as the generational leadership changes that we've been talking about, which means this is an opportunity to look ahead and to inform our current activities and decisions in ways that will help to usher in some of the changes that we think will strengthen the organizations and further energize the sector. We're also at a moment in time of uniquely focused attention on issues of justice and equity, with unprecedented investments in transformation, everything from meaningful self-examination by organizations to find new ways to take their ideals of justice, their ideals and commitments to equity, and to turn them into concrete activities and impacts. The unprecedented leadership transitions underway in many community development organizations, and the scale of investments in infrastructure, communities, and neighborhoods that is underway or that we're anticipating. I just want to add one more point on here, is that I've had the opportunity, as Kasey has also shared, to talk with and to learn from some of the individuals who've completed some of the first phase of course learning as part of the early launch of the Institute. And this group was broadly representative with respect to race, gender, language, And I was reminded of how interest in community development as a profession really does cut across such a broad cross-section of backgrounds. People who are early in their careers or mid-careers and seeking a new opportunity, all bringing their specific interests and motivations to engage in and explore this work, and all having rich connections to their communities that also seem to shape both their interest in the Institute and the two-way benefits of this effort, which is benefits for the participants, but also benefits for the organizations and for the communities that will be served through those activities.
Thanks, Fran. So when LISC assumed management of the HCDLI, it was really important for us to find ways to expand the learning opportunities to the sector more broadly, especially looking at entry and mid-level employees already working in the community development field. And so to this end, we established the following key goals to really guide us in how we would structure the HCDLI moving forward. The first was really in alignment with the original intent of the program, which was to expand the number of BIPOC professionals entering the housing and community development sector. The second was to create, again, ongoing professional opportunities for folks who are already working within the community development field. And then lastly, to offer networking and collaboration between professionals and organizations for long-term sustainability and growth. That first goal, to support HCDLI cohort participants with real concrete and defined learning pathways, LISC narrowed the focus into three key areas. The first being affordable housing development. The second, affordable housing and asset management, which will include connections to public housing management certification courses, and then resident services delivery and engagement. We will connect the cohort participants with live workshops that we'll host through the HCDLI, as well as self-guided virtual webinars from entities like NeighborWorks America. We're also going to offer what we're calling core courses that cohort participants will be asked to take that will help provide that foundational knowledge for a successful career within community development. And an important aspect of this learning plan includes an internship placement, which Fran will speak a bit more about.
Yeah, and that's something that we're really excited about, because one of the things that really will help to advance the learning, advance the sector, and engage a whole range of participants in the work of the Institute. It's like a village. It takes a village to move this work forward. Is that the internship is envisioned as a hands-on applied learning component of the Institute that will expose participants to a variety of real-world roles in the community development sector. We're framing it initially, again, as a 6-month placement opportunity with a particular community-based organization. This will help to broaden the exposure for participants and to build their experience and inform their current and future decision-making as they move through this career and leadership development process. It will also build relationships with organizations in the community development sector who will be partners by hosting interns in their organizations. And to date, we've had a number of conversations with potential host sites, and they've all expressed great interest in this internship opportunity. So far, the focus of most of our conversations have been with housing-oriented community-based organizations. So we haven't broadened that yet into other types of community-based community development organizations, such as land use planning, policy, and other types of organizations that we'll also be reaching out to. So it's mostly been talking with housing authorities, with some of the CDCs. And again, they've all expressed tremendous interest in this internship opportunity. And so we're looking to spend the next few weeks really building out some of the elements of what that will look like and framing out some of the activities and the resources to support that work. So yeah, I think that will be a next step for us.
And the important piece is that they will be paid internships, as
Yes.
Fran kind of iterated. And we're fortunate, again, through funding from the Department of Housing and Connecticut Housing Finance Authority, we'll be able to provide grant subsidies to those host organizations to help offset the cost of hosting paid interns. So that second goal for us, really focusing on expanding those learning opportunities is to, again, extend those workshops to entry and mid-level employees who are currently working within the community development sector. And because of the funding from DOH and CHFA, these will be made available at no charge. So it's a great way for, organizations to support their employees in continuing professional development opportunities without being a significant cost to the organization as a whole. And again, was an important component for us at LISC when taking on the management of the HCDLI, that this was opened up more broadly. And so I'm just going to pose this question to you, Fran, given your experience working within Connecticut and the community development sector, how do you see offering these expanded opportunities as really being a value add to build capacity here in the state?
I think that, again, the timing of this couldn't be better for many reasons. I think for some of the reasons that we've been talking about already. I would just add a little bit of additional background and say that in the past 10 to 15 years in Connecticut, we've seen a real growth in focus on what we call leadership development resources and programs and projects. But none of them have been community development focused and really specific to the needs of the community development sector. The Affordable Housing Alliance at one point had convened and supported a small community development oriented affinity group called Emerging Leaders, which was, to my knowledge, the only community development focused group of its type, and which was a real opportunity to learn a little bit. And that experience has informed some of the processes and practices that we're bringing forward with the Leadership Institute right now. But I would add that the Institute does represent a commitment to an investment in the future leaders of the community development sector. I think this investment by the Department of Housing and by CHFA is the first such investment of its type in the state of Connecticut. It's something absolutely to call out and to acknowledge and to validate the importance of that, both for our needs today and going forward with the work of the future. I think this investment in technical knowledge development, coupled with this really intentional integration of applied learning, exposure, and experience, is a new paradigm in our state for supporting and advancing the sector, and is something that we're looking forward to building out more fully as we go forward. And I agree, I think with what you've been saying, Kasey, that this strategy will invite and engage a much more diverse and representative network of participants who bring their lived community connections and relationships and deep interest in communities to the experience. And I know some of this because we've actually had some success and have had a chance to have conversations with folks who've been participating in some of the first cohort of participants in the Institute coursework. And they've informed some of our learning and conversations going forward as we begin to build out the internship and some of the other kinds of more intentional hands-on supports. We'll talk a little bit more about that before we end the presentation today. And it's already engaged the interest of future employers and community development organizations, again, based on some of the conversations that we've had so far in planning for the internships. But again, these are opportunities and both challenges and opportunities that we can capitalize in moving this work forward.
All right, and lastly, goal 3, building connections across the sector. So to promote networking and collaboration, the HCDLI will plan to host career panels and networking events. And we're really keeping our fingers crossed that those will be in-person opportunities. While technology has been great to keep us connected, nothing beats in-person networking. So that is our plan, probably starting in the spring and moving forward. And then we'll also be looking to send out regular communications, with details about professional development workshops, other events, and as well as sharing when there are employment positions available at different organizations. Again, really just hoping to promote connections across the sector. So what can current participants expect? Recently, I had the opportunity to complete one-on-one meetings with all of the participants. And I must say, I was really excited after getting to meet with everyone and learning more about what's bringing them to the table to participate in this program, hearing about their backgrounds and their experiences. You know, it was just really great to see the passion that's behind and what's driving their interest in participating in this program. And as Fran mentioned, you know, they're coming from all different areas. So some people are employed full-time and looking to make a career change. Others are not and are really ready to just dive right in and take in as many learning opportunities as possible. Others are exploring education opportunities simultaneously to further their career. But again, what they all have in common is a real passion for making change in their communities, especially related to affordable housing and community revitalization. So with that said, when we were working to create this curriculum, you know, we wanted to make sure that it was really meeting the needs of the participants. You know, many of these individuals are going to spend the next 12 months really committed to these different learning opportunities. And we wanted to make sure that they were walking away from that program feeling as though they had the skill sets needed to create a successful career in the community development sector. And so part of this, you know, we were looking at ensuring there's regular communications that are going out to share, you know, notices about workshops and learning opportunities, but also sharing about news and best practices that's happening in the community development sector. Because for the most part, this is the first time that folks are really getting introduced to this work. And so we want to make sure that they get connected with the resources they need to be successful. We also are planning to hire a program assistant who will manage the day-to-day operations and outreach for this program, recognizing that it's important for cohort participants to have that direct person that they can reach out to and just have dedicated to ensuring that this program it has a successful launch and then can continue moving forward. And so I do also want to plug at this time that we have the capacity to add additional participants. And so if there are any organizational leaders on the call today, and you have entry-level staff that you're looking to cultivate and retain within your organization, please reach out to discuss opportunities to enroll that person in the cohort program. Because of the transition with LISC taking over, we are starting with a new cohort of individuals with this newly revised learning plan. So it's a great time for you to refer some of your employees in if you feel as though they would benefit from more intensive learning opportunities and trainings.
And so just to wrap up with some outlines, again, building on Kasey's descriptions of what participants can expect, but we really see this as an opportunity to broaden our partnerships. Partnerships with internship sites and hosts. Again, we've started to have those conversations. We'll be reaching out to other organizations and partners. If you're in this conversation with us today and have an interest in potentially being an internship host site, or you'd like to find out more about what that would involve, please feel free to reach out to Kasey or I. We'd love to have that conversation with you. And we see this as a real opportunity, both for the participants, but also for your organization. We'll also be looking to build into the program mentoring capacity and opportunities for cohort participants as they're moving through the process and the programs, and also to support them in their own individual career journey. Someone with experience in the field who has the capacity and the interest in being a one-on-one mentor with an individual will be working to engage and identify those individuals as well. Again, another type of support that can add richness to the experience of individual participants. A career panel, which is another opportunity to have maybe an informal conversation. Again, bringing together people who have some experience in the field from different aspects of community development to have a conversation with participants, with a subset of the cohort participants to talk about some of their experiences, challenges, successes, struggles, lessons learned, and some of the excitement about being in the field. And also potentially, again, I know that Kasey's been reaching out to folks, inviting experts in our field to be part of a workshop or a panel session. We'd love to capitalize on your knowledge and your experience and bring that to bear in some form through the Institute. So again, hoping that if you're in this conversation with us today, you will think about it and reach out to us for more information.
Great, thanks, Fran.
Sure.
That really concludes the overview we wanted to share with you today about the HCDLI. I know we did have a couple of questions in the chat, so I do want to touch on those first before we open up for additional questions. I see there was one from Cheryl. Will internships be allowed at places of employment? So that's a great question, because we do have some folks who are enrolled in the HCDLI that are currently working at different community development organizations. So I don't know, Fran, if you have some ideas, because this is still really in the early stages of developing this program and this initiative.
Sure. I think that's a great question. And absolutely, again, we want this to work for you and for the internship site. So that will be part of the conversation, but there's absolutely no reason why it can't be the same organization. And that absolutely can probably facilitate ease of access, I'm sure, among other things. So we'd love to have that conversation with you and with your employer and see how we can figure that out.
Great. And then Rachel's, already indicated that she's interested in the mentorship or intern hosting. So that's great. Thank you for taking that initiative on and for raising your hand for that, Rachel. We really appreciate that.
Excellent.
Do we have any other questions? I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so I can be a bit more conversational now at this point. Well, if at any point, here we go. Question from Kristen. So how do you identify potential cohort participants? When LISC assumed the program this fall, it came with a group of about, or roughly between 20 and 30 individuals who had already signed up and been participating. And we are now down to about roughly 20 individuals who are still committed to finishing up this learning pathway, to leave the program with a certificate, whether that's from an official entity around affordable housing development or potentially public housing certification. We have one individual that's ready to take their examination for that, which is great. But ultimately, we are looking at the possibility to bring on a few more individuals to the program. So at this juncture, I mentioned, opening up if there are any organizational leaders on here or folks who have entry or mid-level staff underneath you that you recognize could benefit from some more intensive professional development opportunities, to please reach out and discuss enrolling them in the program. This current iteration of the HCDLI, I had mentioned that this was a 3-year initial commitment from Department of Housing and CHFA. So that contract is ultimately ending December 2022. We are looking to continue this work. We recognize the value in it. Fran has spoken about the importance of this and the historic significance of this level of investment to create this program. And one of the things that we'll be looking at doing over the course of the year is identifying a more formal process by which folks can apply and be accepted into the program that would then start for next year. Kind of hoping that we have continued funding and opportunities to keep this work going.
And I think that also this phase of this work also gives us an opportunity to build out new networks of relationships, right? And to hear from you and your networks and their networks and others who may be of interest in community development, but hadn't necessarily seen themselves in the community development space. Or in a community development organization or at a table where community development issues are centered and talked about. And so again, we really value the opportunity to talk with you today and hope that you will feel free to share some of this conversation with others in your own networks, because that is really how community development essentially works.
Great. Well, if there are no other questions, we really appreciate everyone attending today. Thank you so much to the partnership for giving us an opportunity to share information about the HCDLI we're very excited about. And I also want to thank my co-presenter, Fran Martin, for joining us today and for working with LISC on this initiative.
A real pleasure. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
Kasey.
Have a great
Thanks,
rest of your
Fran.
day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.